What are some NSFW history facts that don't get taught in school? If you look up Edward Russell in history books or even Wikipedia, you learn about his military service, including Admiral of the Royal Fleet for some famous battles. What they don't teach is that he threw a party so epic it's still being talked about 300 years later. In 1694, he threw a party for officers, and with 6,000 guests coming, wanted to make it special. So, he made the world's largest Sikh tail, drained the garden fountain and used that as a giant punch bowl with hundreds of gallons of liquor, over a half-ton of sugar, thousands of lemons, etc. He hired bartenders to paddle around in boats, scoop it up, and serve it to attendees. At some point, it began to rain, so they put a tent up over the fountain to prevent it getting watered down. About a week after they started, they had drank every last drop. The fountain was dry, and the party was over. The father of microbiology, Antony van Leeuwenhoek, was the first to examine semen under a microscope immediately after ejaculating in his wife. Alexander the Great had 361 concubines, official prostitutes. 4 more and he would have one for every day of the year. During the Age of Sail, anytime a large ship would come into port, the men often wouldn't be allowed shore leave for a few days. So you would see small boats packed with prostitutes heading out to the ship at mooring. Larger ships of the line would have over 500 men aboard, so there could definitely be a couple hundred ladies brought aboard, behind the captain's back. And with virtually no privacy aboard, you would have spaces in the ship with hundreds of couples going at it at once. There were definitely a lot of captains that didn't allow any women aboard, so the sailors on those ships would just have to wait until they could go ashore. There was a Greek general who was supposed to lead a major expedition to Sicily. The night before he left, he got wasted and walked around Athens with his other drunk friends and knocked all of the penises off of the statues in Athens. This caused him to be arrested. He missed the expedition and they lost almost all of the men they sent to Sicily because only he knew the plan well enough to pull it off. Catherine the Great had a parlor room filled with explicit, erotic furniture she commissioned personally. We're talking BJS carved into chairs, an end table where giant DCKS torrential cumshots were holding up a marble countertop, a woman getting eaten out by a demon on a throne. Homegirl had taste. Roman brothels had pictures of the prostitutes' specialties above the door to their room. The first person who was sentenced to the electric chair died horribly. Someone forgot to wet an essential part of the machine and he ended up with bubbling skin, melting eyes and a foaming mouth, among other things. The amount of electricity was so strong that he began to convulse violently, so much so that he weakened straps. He twitched so erratically that his index finger dug through the palm of his hand. The entire room smelled of burning flesh, and the stench even permeated some clothes. Many people who came to see had fainted during the execution. But do you know what's even more horrible? They heard him wheezing after they turned the electricity off. Edit. Thanks for the gold and silver. The German army was given methamphetamines during their invasion of France, Belgium, Netherlands in 1940. This was the other part of a blitzkrieg that isn't really talked about. For the first 3 days the German army advanced without rest. No stopping or sleeping for 3 days straight. If you got tired they just gave you more meth. The drug may have also played a role in why the Panzer divisions refused to stop even after being ordered to several times by high command. They only finally stopped advancing when Hitler personally ordered the halt. TLDR. An army of methed up Nazis took down the largest army in Europe in a few weeks. Edit. Netflix has a good documentary series on it now. Cleopatra was nicknamed Regina Meretrix, the queen of the WHRES. 12-year-old Pocahontas used to entertain white colonists with nude cartwheels. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable. At the Battle of Agincourt most of the English archers fought pantsless because they had serious diarrhea and were literally shitting themselves as they fought. They won too. Jenny Wade was a prostitute and a madam. He wasn't a kind and generous soul who was treating the wounded from both sides of the Battle of Gettysburg. She was offering her services to both sides. When you take the bus tour with recorded audio, the storyteller narrating the tour is supposed an old-timer reflecting on the battle. When you pass the Jenny Wade house, still standing, he says something like, double quote, "That's the Jenny Wade house. Jenny was a friend of mine. She was a friend to many." I always liked that subtle nod. In the 12th century, a philosopher named Peter Abelard challenged the church teaching on sexual morality, pointing out that no ceremony of man could make an inherently immoral act moral. The act would have to be already generally moral. Therefore, sex before marriage really couldn't be considered a mortal sin. He fell in love with the wrong woman and had his nuts cut off. This made him angry and sad. He then wrote a book. Newton was so dedicated to his work and abhorred fun so much that many people believe he died a virgin at 87 years old. And by work, I don't mean revolutionizing physics and inventing calculus. I mean alchemy. His main focus was turning lead into gold and making the philosopher's stone. In any history course, the rampant upping done by most occupying forces around the world, e.g. Japan in World War II. Pretty much every town, village, city that was invaded from the time of the earliest civilizations. It's been like this. Still happens today. Outside of modern professional fighting forces, ARPing and looting was always accepted as the best perk of being a soldier. Ancient Greece society was all about butt sex. It gets glossed over or referred to in a passing and vague way. In fact, part of the curriculum of well-off kids, from fancy Athenians to tough Spartans, was being poked from behind by your teacher tutor. Child grooming was more or less systemic, a necessary step in life for most men. Not necessarily NSFW. But pirates were one of the first people to have a healthcare plan of sorts. If you lost an appendage, there was a predetermined pay for everything that was lost or maimed. Also, there was a pretty large number of female pirates. For a time when women had little to no value in the workplace, they more or less had equal treatment and pay to other pirates. Don't know if it's already been said, but Edgar Allan Poe married his 13-year-old cousin when he was very much older than her. John F. Kennedy took the virginity of his 19-year-old intern and had her give another guy a BJ poolside. He was kinda a creepy dude in general. If you ever visit Prague, definitely go to the SX Machines Museum. I felt so naive of how unaware I was about how horny we as a species have been. Since, literally, ever. The steam-powered dildo is a triumph of mechanical engineering. Henry VIII, aside from his 3 legitimate children, had at least 6 other illegitimate kids with various mistresses. There is also a suit of armor made for him on display, and the codpiece alone weighs 1.3 kilograms. In late imperial China, a concubine earmarked for sex by the emperor later at night would be pampered all day. When the night of the deed came, the palace servants stripped the girl naked, wrapped her in a silk blanket, and carried her to the emperor's bed to unwrap her there. This practice wasn't for imperial majesty's kinks. It was a security measure. Sometime earlier, a concubine tried to assassinate an emperor during sex with weapons hidden in her clothing. If we had the same medical practices today as we did a few hundred years ago, a woman could check into a doctor's office complaining that she was feeling emotional and the doctor would get her off with a vibrator. President Lyndon B. Johnson, as the name implies, was infamous for talking about his penis and boasting how big it was. There's a recording of Johnson arguing on the phone with pants manufacturers about how they failed to leave enough room for the crotch, and actively creating a detailed verbal picture of his presidential groin. When my high school history teacher asked the class what we knew about Johnson, my answer was not what he was looking for but was what I felt the class needed. Apparently George Washington was so attractive that when he was 17 he went swimming in a creek and some girls stole his clothes so they could see him wander around half naked. IDK if it's true or not though. Plato thought that the babies inherited everything from their parents, and therefore from perfect parents having intercourse at the perfect moment would born perfect babies. Imagine an equilateral triangle with the parents in 2 of the corners and the baby in the 3rd. He thought that these babies would be the superior race. Consequently, a political utopia would be originated from a genetic utopia. Gandhi was a molester. Most of the ladies at his ashram were molested by him. He kinda went at it with a minor too. Nehru died of syphilis. Him and the viceroy's wife were going at it. Edit. For those that don't know, ashram means sanctuary or abode.